Hi, this is the Daily Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now today I want to talk about how much you should charge your clients. Alright, so I've been asked by a couple of people now about pricing for clients. So at least one of these people used to be a permanent employee. They're trying to strike out on their own and do a little bit of client work, right? But they're not quite sure what to charge. So they had a bunch of questions about this. So it's kind of trying to help answer some of those, right? And for me, pricing, when doing a client project, pricing is probably one of the trickiest parts. You know, you don't want to go too high, you definitely don't want to go too low, and there's a lot of things to think about that you might not even consider. First of all, like one of the big mistakes you can make is to just do it completely based on time. So let's say as a permanent employee you were making let's say you were making like $50,000 a year, and you think, well, I was making $50,000 a year. If I divide that by 45 weeks in the year, divide that by five days in the week, so that'd be what, $222 a day. Divide that by 8 to get the hour. So that's how much I'm going to charge. I think the project will take me 10 days. That's how much it's going to cost. Right? That's if you're doing fixed price. Otherwise you can do time and material. By the way, I've never charged on time and material for client projects, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. But it would be a lot easier. It would make my life a lot easier if I did, but it would also be harder to get clients that way. So if you did that just completely based on time, based on the mentality of, I was a permanent employee, that's how much they paid me, that's how much I'm going to charge this client, so you basically say, you're their employee for 10 days or whatever, right? That's usually like a really bad strategy, and everything goes wrong because it doesn't take into consideration a lot of other things that you're going to need to think about. First of all, if you do client work, even if you work from home, even if you have your own computer, internet's paid for, all that kind of stuff, even if you have no overhead expenses, you still have to think about finding your next client project. So you have to think about marketing and other types of things, and how long you're going to be out of work, all that kind of stuff afterwards, which is perfectly normal. It's like normal in business. Like if I hire an attorney to work on a contract, or I hire my accountants, I'm under no illusion that I'm only hiring their time, right? I'm also hiring my pay. There's markup that helps pay for their lights and computers and offices and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's not just free. So I know that part of what I pay them goes to that. And it's the same with you. They're not hiring you as an employee. You're not their employee temporarily. They're hiring you. You're providing them a service. You're providing them the work, right? And also, when it comes to doing that, right, you have to think about the risks involved. And again, with fixed price projects, you have to think about scope creep. You have to think about whether or not everything's going to be how well documented is it in the beginning. I have never had anybody come to me with a fully mapped out plan of what everything should do. A lot of it was interpretation. Most of the time, they don't have any documentation at all, to be honest with you. But sometimes they'll come with some wireframes, and we'll talk through how some things will work. How should this work? But there's always going to be a little bit of wiggle room at the end where they say, actually, this moves over here, this moves over here, that kind of stuff. Scope creep is a fact of life. It's death, taxes, and scope creep. That's just the way it is. If you do time and material, great, because every time they bother you, they know that they're on the clock, right? But I've never been able to get a project like that. I suppose I could, but it's just, I like to give a fixed price. I like to remove the risk from the equation, right? Because risk is something that's involved in every software project, and the less risk that your client has, the more likely they are to buy. The more you can assure them that things are going to work out fine, you don't have to worry about that, right? So anyway, when it goes back to the pricing, I think back to when I was at one of my first contracts. So my last permanent job was as a permanent employee. It was 14 or 15 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. And I was making $38,000 a year, right? And so I worked that out to be, I think it was like 147 pounds a day, right? So I know to some of you guys that sounds like a lot of money. To me at the time, it was, it was just enough, right? And so then I took on a contract which was significantly more. It was like $238, and then I took on another contract which was like $350, right? And then that was I thought, I'm just making loads of money now. I can't believe they were paying me. I felt guilty for how much they were paying me. In fact, if they had asked me, how much do you want to be paid? I'm so glad they didn't. But if they'd asked me, I probably would have said, oh, no, 160, right? but they didn't. So I was at 350, and that was like, in years to come, that was a low rate, right? That was like, I wouldn't work for that now if I was to go back to contracting, right? But we had this. So I was in this team, right? And a new manager had come in, and he was like, right the ship and all this kind of stuff. And he got a lot of us contractors together, and he said, I've seen how much you guys are paid. I think it's criminal how much this place is paying you guys. And I was like the first one to speak up, and I said, I know you're right. Yeah, I know we do get paid a lot. Yeah, I don't understand it. I feel a bit guilty about it, actually, right? And then somebody else cut me off right there, right? As he rightly should have. He said, no. We have other expenses that you don't have to think about. We're not always working. We have to think about what we're going to be doing after this contract. We have down periods. We have to do our own training. We have to keep our skills sharp. And all this. He started rattling off all these things, which were absolutely true, but I had never even considered, right? I just thought, I'm getting paid more than I was before. And then it was from that moment on I started thinking differently about being a contractor as to being an employee, right? I wasn't just providing my time. I wasn't just, the company was not taking care of me. I was taking care of myself, and I was providing them a service. This is something to think about when you're charging your clients too, right? You're not just, giving them time and they're paying you for your time. You're giving them a service. You're giving them your knowledge and your years of experience, and so that they can pay you. Now, there's always going to be somebody who will charge less than you. I mean, I suppose there's one guy who won't be charged less than I, somewhere. But one thing that you have to make sure that the clients understand is that if they hire you, it's less risky than hiring them, and you do that by having a good portfolio, having testimonials, all that kind of stuff. In every project, somebody's taking the risk. Somebody's taking more risk than others, right? If they want to take on more risks, they can hire somebody who's less skilled, less experienced, all that kind of stuff. But they will pay you more if you can take some of that risk away. You can say, look, we always finish our projects. We always finish on budgets. We never overcharge. All that kind of stuff. We will, this price is the price that we're going to charge you. And the only reason we will change it is if there's significant changes in your plan. All that kind of stuff, so that they know, even though the price may seem a little bit high to them, it's not, it's worth that risk, because they know that, it's a sure thing to be done. So I hope that helps a little bit. I know it's such a complicated, prospect. And if you're outsourcing, there's a whole bunch of other things to consider, like, how reliable are your developers, how, what can go wrong? Are you gonna have to step in the 12th hour and just fix everything yourself? Right? It happens sometimes, right? And there's lots of other things to consider, and you want to come up with a good price that's good for the client. Now, you guys probably know I never say how much I charge clients, right? And I know you guys have asked. I have like one video I did a few years ago where like the title of it was, how much does it cost to do an app? And I got so many thumbs down on that one, and people complain, it's like, you never answered the question. And it's because it's different in each case. And one of the things that I don't want to do is publicly say, oh, I charge this much, and then something more complex comes along, and then I have no wiggle room there to add to the scope of that, because it's you have to consider lots of different factors that come into it. So it's not just time. When you're charging for your first client, I mean, the odds are your first client you're going to undercharge, right? I've done it. I've undercharged on far too many projects that I know better, but I also know how to handle those objections when they start saying, "Ooh, I don't know, that's a bit much." The biggest thing is to have your pipeline full, right? You're not going to be able to serve everybody, and some people are going to say, "No, but this guy over here, he charges a lot less." And you say, "Yeah, that's your prerogative to go with them." Anyway, that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.